Alrighty. I'm going to say time's up, end of the song is up, and we are going to go ahead and get started. As people join, if you're just joining us now, no worries. We'll kind of give a quick intro here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hi, my name is Kate Newton. I'm with GSVlabs, and we are really excited today to host this webinar with Airtable. From a personal note, I actually just started using Airtable in the last couple months, as well as a couple other no-code tools like Zaps and things like that. And as a non-techie, it has transformed my life. So just been my experience so far. So I have a ton of questions and just excited to kind of learn more from you and kind of how Airtable sees this and the tips and tricks of the game. So excited to have David Peterson here with us. He runs partnerships at Airtable, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. And he is currently in London. So we're taking it international here, as are many of our members jumping on. So, all right, I'll hand it over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Kate. And thanks for planning this and scheduling this. I'm really excited to be here. So I have a deck that I'll kind of walk through a little bit. And also, we're going to spend a lot of time just like in some products and playing around as well. So yeah, just get excited, get in front of your computer and get ready to build some things. Also, I'll have the chat window like up on the right-hand side of my screen. So if you have any questions, and I'll call out for questions throughout, but if you have any questions, throw it in there. If I'm going too slowly, throw it in there. If anything, please like keep it active. Sometimes it can be hard to make these things work well over Zoom remotely. So just want to make sure you all know I'll be looking and paying attention to that. All right, let me start sharing my screen. I'm going to jump in here. Okay, let me present here. And okay. So the name of the game today is no-code tools. We're going to be talking about Airtable, of course, but also kind of the entire no-code ecosystem. So Airtable plus Zapier, Parabola, all these other tools, how they can work together. And the focus of this session is going to be on how we can use these tools to automate, build systems, build processes, build internal software, and automate operations so you can grow your company faster. So there could be a whole other session on building MVPs, building prototypes, building no-code mobile apps, things like that. That's not what we're going to talk about today. Here, we're really going to talk about like how do you make your business run faster using these tools, just to kind of level set. Okay, so agenda. I'm going to spend the first 15 minutes just setting the stage. So talking about kind of quick history of computing, how we got to where we are, what the problem is that we're all facing, and how no-code tools can help, I think. And then we'll spend.
Sorry to interrupt you real quick. Can you put the presentation in full screen by chance? I think it.
Yeah.
Your top bar there.
How does that work?
Nice, perfect.
Okay, cool. Wait, does it still look okay if I do that? No. Ooh, no, it stopped. All right.
Less, yeah. Presents that.
I'll leave it like this. Cool. So I'm actually with it like this. I can't see the chat window. So Kate, if you can call out if anybody is confused, let me know.
I can do that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, here's the quick agenda. Before digging in there, though, just want to introduce myself. So there's that same picture of me. Okay, so yeah, I work on partnerships at Airtable. I've been at Airtable for about 3 years and kind of worn a lot of different hats there. But something I've done the whole time has been working with startups and accelerators and investors on how they can use Airtable to run their operations and grow faster. So that's been a total kind of passion of mine. But some other background that is just a little bit relevant for us here today is before I joined Airtable, I actually worked in seed stage venture. And before that, I started a company of my own. And I think back on it now, it's quite funny. I started this company and hacked together the MVP of it in a weekend with Airtable and Zapier. This was 2015, back before before no code was a thing that people were saying, they're like, I was playing around with these tools and totally fell in love with Airtable as I did it. So that's one reason why this workshop in particular has such a special place in my heart, because I think these tools can be incredibly empowering if you just kind of open your eyes to them. So let's dig in. How did we get here? So this is just quick history lesson. Thinking about the history of computing here, you know, it's kind of trite to say, but computers have gotten way more understandable over time, right? Like you look at the mainframe in the upper left-hand corner, compare that just to the punch card reader, you know, and already you're able to like actually interact with the computer. Compare that to the terminal. Now you can type and the computer can understand you, you know, and then compare that to the Macintosh GUI. Now you can interact with the computer like with physical touch with a mouse. Like that is an amazing progression of making computers more human understandable, right? Like human, understandable to humans, something that we can really communicate with. But, you know, I would argue that programming languages, despite getting more expressive over time, you know, have not really followed the same trajectory. They're still quite hard for most people, most non-programmers to understand. You know, you certainly can't read programming languages like you can read, you know, a language that we speak. And I think actually Charles Simoni has like this great quote to capture this. So he was a technology leader at Microsoft, you know, developed Excel. And, you know, he said that he called programmers unwitting cryptographers, by which he means, you know, programmers are capturing all of the requirements, everything that their software needs to solve. And then they solve it, but they hide all of that, all the solution, all of the logic in code that nobody else can understand. And that, I think this is actually the status quo here. I think it's kind of bad for everybody. So if you're an engineer, you know, and there might be some here today who are kind of lurking to see what is this no code thing about. But if you're an engineer, you're probably inundated with requests from your teammates to build these kind of small tools, integrations. But you're thinking to yourself, like, how can I possibly prioritize this against building product for customers? Like that is what I really need to do. Maybe you eventually get it on your roadmap, but you know, you're not really close to the problem you're solving, right? It's your teammates' problem. So you have to go back and forth to try to figure it out. Maybe you don't even get it right the first time because, you know, maybe they don't even know what their problem is, right? It's like, it's kind of unclear. And then finally, you know, you ship it, but now you're on the hook to keep it up and running. So now it's just like an albatross around your neck that you have to deal with. And, you know, for everybody else, this is probably a lot more of us in the room. This is certainly me. You know, this has certainly been my experience. You're thinking to yourself, like, I just need this one simple thing built and it'll save me like 10 hours a week. You know, why can't I just get this built? But you know that it could take like weeks, months, you know, maybe forever to get on the roadmap. And you also know that it'll probably be solved imperfectly anyway, right? It'll be kind of like rushed through. It'll be an imperfect solution that now you have to deal with. So, and I think this is where most people end up. So you say to yourself, well, probably just better to brute force it. You know, I'll just manage it manually. I'll stay up late, like clicking that button 100 times in a row because I don't want to deal with any of this. And I think ultimately the motivating question of this workshop is, what if everybody could actually build the tools they need? What if that didn't need to be the case anymore? You know, what if when you thought, I have this thing that's going to save me 10 hours a week, if instead you could go build it yourself? That is where we want to get in 45 minutes or whatever it is. So I think that's where this is where the no code stack in our formulation is really powerful. So I'm going to give a quick tour of the no code stack, then give an example of these tools used really well, you know, kind of at a full scale to build out some pretty cool products. And then we'll start building some stuff together. So the stack. I like to think of this as, like, by analogy, like thinking about a web app. So, you know, a web app that you're familiar with, at the bottom layer, you have the database, and that's SQL, whatever it might be in the web app world. In no code world, that's Airtable. Airtable is ultimately kind of the database layer. Then, on top of SQL, on top of the database, you have business logic. Basically, you have, like what happens when this happens? How do I integrate with these other tools? What am I looking for? That is code, really. And in the no code world, we use what I'm calling here connectors. And that's like Zapier, which maybe you're familiar with. We'll be using that a little bit today. Or Parabola, which maybe you're familiar with. We're going to use that one as well. Integromat is another powerful one. And then on the very top, you have like the front end UI, right? And in a normal web app, that's going to be coded up yourself. On the no code side of things, there's a whole range of tools that you can use. One is kind of like the old school, WordPress, Squarespace, right? Like those are, let's be honest, those are no code tools too. But there's also some new ones that are interesting. Like I'd call out Card, which is listed right there. That's really great for single pages, like a long single website. It's dead simple to get started with. More complicated, but also really powerful, Webflow. And then I called out the logo there for MemberStack, which is actually a great way to build a subscription service, or like a membership oriented business, if that's something that you're kind of interested in hacking together. And then of course there's some all-in-one builders here too that called that at the bottom, and that kind of like, they kind of try to combine all of these things together, as best as they can. So this is the world of the no code worlds that we have right here. I want to give an example, kind of a utopia, a North Star example of what can be built with these tools when you have a clear problem and you push them all together to make something happen. So there's a company called The Family. They're a big incubator based in Paris, so somewhat close to me over here in London. And it's a really interesting story. So so they're a community, 250, 300 startups now, I think closer to 800 founders in this community. And so what's really interesting, before digging into the specific flows here, they had an engineering team that was building a product suite for them to run The Family on. And this was a year-long project. They were 9 months into it, and the engineering team left. I forget the actual circumstances of why they left, but suffice it to say, they were no longer working on the product, and they weren't going to be anytime soon. So the folks at The Family were kind of faced with this choice, which was, do we try to hire somebody else, to finish building what has already been started? There's this huge sunk cost, 9 months of work, right? But somebody at the firm had started playing around with some of these no-code tools, and they said, like, give me a month and let me see if I can just recreate it. So over the next month, this one person recreated what that engineering team had built over the course of 9 months using just the tools you see here. And I'll walk you through one piece of it just to kind of get the juices flowing on what you can build. But at some point, we're going to do a deep dive with them and just like show off everything they've done. It's super, super cool. As I was saying, they use Airtable, Zapier, Slack, Webflow, and actually Firebase, when they're running code, they have written a few lines of code to run basically all the internal operations for their community. They built a bunch of different like products. One is their onboarding system. Another is their whole event planning system. Last is this thing they call No Founder Left Behind, where they're automatically alerted when founders in the community aren't engaging in different ways, so they can reach out to them and help them. All of it, no code. So let me I'm going to walk through quickly the way the onboarding system works, so you can kind of start to get a sense of how these tools can work together. So the onboarding example, every new founder, or every new company, when they're joining, all of the founders, the founding team, fill out a form. to get onboarded into the community. In this case, it's an Airtable form that like pipes the data directly into Airtable. And they ask, on that form, they ask for people's role. You know, are you a technical founder? Are you the CEO? Or are you in sales? Whatever it might be. And they also ask for their interests, you know, things that they're interested in, along with a bunch of other stuff, but that's kind of relevant for now. So when that data hits the Airtable form, that triggers a Zap. So that triggers Zapier to ping Slack. And what they do in Slack is pretty cool. They create a new channel in their Slack, a new private channel in their Slack for that company, and invite all of the founders to it. Then they also invite all of those founders to all the public channels that they think those founders would be interested in based on their interests. So it's pretty slick. It's not super complicated, but it's also the type of thing that if you were doing this manually for every new team that was joining, this could take a ton of your time up. And maybe you could do it for one team a week, but when you're doing 10, 20, 30 teams a week, all of a sudden it's a full-time job just to manage that. But that's actually not it. What they also do is sync all of that Airtable data to Webflow. And on Webflow, they built a community platform. And there, every company can look at all the other companies that are in the community. They can ask for introductions. They can look at a mentor list. They can ask for introductions to the mentors. What's really nice is that is kept in sync and up to date immediately whenever the founders fill out the form. So there's nobody has to go into any CMS and update anything, right? It's all the same system. It's all working together. And I want to reinforce the person who built this does not know, is not a programmer, right? This is not an engineer who is building this. This is somebody who just decided to go deep on these tools, and they had a clear problem and they went after it to solve it. So here's our North Star. I think this is where we can all get. But I think really what it reinforces is that, the promise of these tools is they empower all of us to start thinking like programmers, right? They empower all of us to start to look at problems in our lives. And rather than saying, I'll just brute force it, rather than saying that, we start thinking, could I actually automate this? Or is it worth automating, and how would I do it? So before we start building, I have a few recommendations for how we could all start thinking a little bit more like engineers. I think really what you want to do is ask yourself 3 very simple questions. First, how often do I do this thing? Second, how much time would it save me to automate this thing? And third, can I easily express it as if this, then that? And just having those questions in your head, if the answer is, often, it would save me a lot of time, and yes, not only could you absolutely should automate it. And I think even by the end of this session, you'll already have the confidence and tools to start doing it. It is that simple. It doesn't take days, weeks, months to get comfortable here. These are dead simple products that you can just jump into. And the last thing I'll say is, I don't know if there's any XKCD fans in the room, but this is a great comic from XKCD, which basically print this out. It's basically this exact thing. How often do you do it? How much time would you save? Here's how much time you should spend automating it. So now we can all keep ourselves honest, and don't spend weeks trying to automate that thing that, wouldn't save you a lot of time. But anyway, I actually keep this up on my computer all the time. All right, we are going to start building now. But I want to check in because I haven't been able to look at the chat. So
we have a few questions.
Do we have any questions? I'm going to look right now.
It starts with Vanessa's question on just up a little bit on how do you manage other stakeholders in the company that are for code, or how do you get them on board? Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Let me look through. I'm going to see. Cool. That's a great question, Vanessa. I think let's chat about that at the end, because I think the context of us building together will be really helpful in how we answer it. And I see, Amanda, you're also interested in that too. And okay, great. Lots of people are interested in this. And Amar, I will be sending out the slides. also. All right, let's let's dig in. And I'm gonna I'll keep the chat open also because I'm gonna be like in Airtable, so I'll be able to see things in real time. So if you have questions about what we're doing, keep on pinging. Okay, so want to start building together here. So I've created what we're gonna do, stepping back, what we're gonna do here, we're gonna dive into an Airtable base together. We're gonna get a sense of the landscape, kind of figure out what it is, and then we're gonna build a few automations on top of it. And then I'm going to show you another one with some more advanced automations just to kind of get the juices flowing. And then we'll save a bunch of time at the end for Q&A. So for this first one, this is the base, really simple base for us to all work out of together. You can go get it if you go to airtable.com/no-code-demo. So I'll just throw that in the chat. And what I'd ask is when you land on that link, just click the copy base button in the upper right-hand corner. If you don't have an account, it'll prompt you to make one as you kind of go through the flow. Otherwise, you can just add it to any workspace. And I'll give everybody 10 seconds to go through that. I'll just take a sip. Cool. Everybody good? Anybody need me to wait? All right. I'm gonna dig in, but again, feel free to jump in the chat with any questions. Okay, so I was thinking about what's the best workflow for us to start with if we want to build some automations together, but we're all kind of from different backgrounds, we're from different companies. So where do we start kind of from square one so we can build together? And I landed on what I'm calling a request workflow. So that's basically what this is. It's like the simplest request workflow that you could imagine. And when I say a request workflow, what I mean is basically it's a system where you receive a request, you triage that request, you delegate it, you set a priority, whatever it might be, and then you track the status of that request over time. So that's the idea. And the reason I thought this might be a useful one to start with is because as I was kind of thinking about the different things that you build internally, I realized that almost all of them, I think like 80% of internal tools probably actually are just request workflows. And you can think like maybe you work in customer support tickets, right? That's basically a request workflow. If you work on the engineering side, product side, like bug tracking, issue tracking, escalations, all requests that you're kind of tracking the status of. If you're an internal team, maybe you're a marketer or you work in data science and you get requests from other teams for you to help them, right? It's a request workflow that you can build. If you're IT or HR and you're onboarding new employees, right? It's just like a request to onboard this new person. So suffice it to say, there's content in this space. I think this one has to do with a marketing team, but just put whatever is relevant to you on it. Don't get tied to the content in here. And I think this flow should probably resonate with something that you would build at your own company. Okay, so want to dive in here. And by the way, you're in your own Airtable base. You can follow along, like edit the things that I'm editing. You can mess it up. It's yours. It's not going to affect what's on the screen here. So, as I said before, Airtable is a database, right? It kind of serves as the database layer, in the no code stack. It looks like a spreadsheet, right? But it's actually a database. And one of the things that makes it uniquely like a database is that all of these columns, we call them fields, have a specific data type. So, when we're looking at this first field, you can kind of just double click or click that down arrow to see the field type. You see this as a single line text field, but there's a whole bunch of other potential fields that you could use. And we'll kind of go through a quick tour of them. For example, this one is an email field, right? So we know that this is an email address. This one is this is a collaborator field. It's basically a good way to delegate tasks, like assign things, not exactly relevant today. This is a single select. It's kind of like a drop down. You can easily add options, by the way, by just typing them in, pressing enter, added a new option. And then you can, easily delete them as well. There's a formula field here. So this lets you do any like Excel-like formula. You can do that. And this is a date field. So this is really nice for capturing both dates and times, which is great. This is the reason I'm really calling this out too, is because the fact that the field types are set is really powerful when you start integrating with other tools and using Zapier or using Parabola, because they're machine readable, right? Like another tool can trust that this is a date, and that other machine can understand exactly what you mean by April 3rd, 2020, right here. Last thing I'll say is there's a few other field types. Like this is a attachment field type, so you can capture PDFs or JPEGs or MP3s or whatever it would be. So this is a quick rundown of the different fields. The key takeaway here is that because we have specific data types that are set, they're machine readable by other systems that we want to work with. So it makes it dead simple to integrate with other systems. The other thing that's really important before we start getting into automating is something we call in Airtable what we call views. So a view, right now we're looking at all of the data, right? Like this is every request that has ever been received in our request system. What a view does is it lets us filter down to just a subset of this data. And that can be really nice if you're actually working out of Airtable. It can be nice because it helps you kind of zero in on what matters, but it's also kind of the superpower for automating things. So we'll talk about both of those things. So I'll give you an example. You can click this button and look at a bunch of these views that I've already set up. So let's see, I created this triage view, for example. So if you go here, you can see the triage view has a different set of filters up top. So in this case, I set 3 filters. Priority is empty, owner is empty, and status is empty. Basically what I'm saying here is all of these records need to be triaged. These requests need to be triaged, and they will have been triaged whenever I set a priority, whenever I set an owner, whenever I set a status. So if a request doesn't have those characteristics, then that means they need to be triaged. So this is a useful way. It's a to-do list for me. Ooh, sorry, hold on. Hi, just got a phone call. So it's a useful to-do list for me, right, that I could use. Views can also, we're not going to go into it now, but you can also use views to look at your data in a different way. So for example, there's a Kanban here if you like looking at things like a Trello board. There's a calendar here if you like looking at things on a calendar. But that's not what we're going to focus on today. You can just play around with that if you want to. Okay. The last thing that I just wanted to show before we dig in is this request form. So what's kind of nice when you're kind of building out a system is you often want to get external data, into your product, right? Like into the tool that you're building. Form can be really helpful for that. So in this case, I created a really simple request form, right? And basically what happens whenever you, just opening up this form, whenever you create a test, as you can imagine, I don't know if I have to fill these out. Yeah. So I submitted the form. So as you can imagine, right, it shows up right at the bottom. So that's what's happening there. What's also kind of nice is, it doesn't have an owner priority or status. So we would imagine that it would be in this triage view, right? And oh yes, it is here. Okay, well, let's triage it together so we can kind of see how this all works. And let's say it's in progress for now. So now we can go down. I created another view for open tasks, and you can see here that's where status is in progress, right? You can see it right here, so that's great. And let's say I complete the task, now you can go and I created this final view for all of the completed tasks. You can see it right there. So this is just a good sense, it gives you a good sense of how these things can like move through different different views. This is the quickest tour of Airtable you'll ever experience here. But that's the basic idea with views. So why are we spending time talking about views? So the reason that views are so powerful when you're thinking about automating, when you're thinking about building automations, is because of the way that Zapier and Integromat, all these tools work. They work based on triggers. So whenever you, the if this then that we were talking about before, the this is often a trigger, and then the that is whatever Zapier is going to go do for you. So what's pretty cool is with Airtable, your trigger can actually be a record entering a view. So whenever a record enters a view for the first time, that can trigger Zapier to go do something for you. That's pretty powerful, right? Because if you're starting to build a whole system in Airtable, then whenever a record, as a record moves through the system that you created, in this case, it moves through the pipeline, let's say, your request pipeline, now you can have Zapier go do stuff for you whenever, as it's moving through the system. So I want to do an example together right now. So I was thinking, what's like the first automation that you would want to build with a request workflow? And I think maybe the simplest possible one would be whenever a request is triaged, I want to email the person who made the request and tell them that we're starting to work on it. So basically, you send in a request, you're twiddling your thumbs waiting for the team to get back to you. This would automatically send off that email, let the person know that you started to work on their request. So let's think through together, how we would build this. So we know that we need to create a view where whenever a record enters into it, in this case, whenever a record has been triaged, we want to send off an email. Okay, so let's think about this. We'll go to the Triage View, and you can create, by the way, you can create new views by just going down here. So this is like add a view, you could add a grid view. One thing that I like to do also is you can duplicate an existing view, which is kind of nice if you want to keep the same formatting. So let's create one we're calling it has been triaged. So the question is, what should the filters be such that the records here are only records that have been triaged, right? Because then whenever a new record enters that view, that's when we'll want to email folks. So it's kind of nice because it's basically the exact opposite of these filters. A request will have been triaged when the priority is not empty, right? And when the owner is not empty and when the status is not empty. Now, these are all of the requests that have been triaged. Okay, so we've set this one up. Now, once you've set this up, you can go to Zapier. So if you have a Zapier account, like now's the time to log into it. And if you don't, no big deal. I'm going to walk through it right now. I'm also going to follow up with the exact recipes for all of these automations. So you'll actually be able to just like click a link and get them set up. So it's okay if you don't have an account right now. And Kara, I just heard you, or I just saw your question. So we do integrate with Atlassian products. So we have actually it's just in beta right now, but something we're working on. It's a sync with Jira. And with Confluence, you can actually embed Airtable bases in Confluence directly. And there's a few other things that you can do between the two, especially when you start leveraging something like Zapier. So happy to talk about that more anytime. Just you can keep on pinging in the chat. Okay, so let's jump into Zapier. So again, the question here is whenever a record has been triaged, we want to send an email. That's our goal right here. So if you haven't used Zapier before, I'm going to blow through this. It's incredibly simple to get started, very user-friendly. Basically, you create the trigger when this happens. So when a new record enters a view, that's where we are. You can just auth into your account here. You choose your Airtable account. Again, very simple. And then we're going to go to the customize a record. So here, what you do is you choose the base that you've been working out of. You choose the table that you've been working out of. So for us, this is actually requests, right? And then you choose the view that you've been working out of. So that's the view that you just created, is the has been triaged view. Then once you do that, you can go search for the data. And Zapier will basically go to Airtable, pull in data that matches from that view, that matches those specifications. And this is where having these fields in Airtable becomes really powerful, because all of this data is, as I was saying, machine readable, right? Like this is a timestamp that makes sense to other computers. So that's pretty powerful. And and we know that this is an email address, right? So that's pretty powerful, and that's something we can use. Okay, so we have that data. We know Zapier has access to it. Then we want to send an email. So in this case, I just authed into Gmail. Again, very, very simple. And then I sent, but what's nice is that Zapier has pulled all of the data from that record that just entered the view. And you can use every piece of it. You can use every field to do different things. So in this case, we're sending the email to the requester email, because if you remember, people had to fill out their email when they filled out the form. Then I wrote this kind of very, very simple email here, like, great news, we received your request, and the owner name, so this is the person we delegated it to, right, is getting to work on it. Here's the status, here's the priority. Again, just like merging in fields from the system that you've already built. And there's the rest of the email. And then you can, you can test it and take a look. And let me see where this email address is. Hold on one second. I'm going to pull it up. Sure, I'll do that. Actually, I'll do that in a minute. But the email went through, but that email is on my other screen. So I'll get to it in a second. Okay, so that is the simplest possible automation that you could ever imagine building. But now I think the exciting thing though is it's not actually that limiting. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of examples of cool automations you could do that use exactly what you know right now and nothing else. So wanted to think through a few of those together actually. I'll just throw these up because I threw them in some slides. So what else could you do with exactly what we've already talked about? So one is you could notify, the requester if more information was needed. Like let's say you don't have all of the information you need to be able to triage the requests. Well, that's just another status that you could create, another view that the record could enter, another automation that you could create. What if you could introduce the requester to the person who's going to be helping them? So this might make a ton of sense if you were onboarding new employees, let's say. Like, let's say you're working in HR, the people ops team, and you want to introduce a new hire with their onboarding buddy. And this could just manage that process completely automatically for you. And then another one here, what about notifying somebody if the request that they own has sat unresolved for a certain number of days? Another example where, again, with everything now, you could create that. And in this case, you would just use a formula. Like create a formula field that compares today to the date that the record was created. And if that ever gets more than 7, enters a new view, ping them, tell them, get to work. So we've learned one automation, but even just that one simple system is going to let you do countless things. But I will say that, these do also feel somewhat simple, right? Because they're just purely notifications. And you can do so much more than just notifications with no-code tools. So I wanted to show you a few other examples, just so you can get a sense of what else you can do, what else is out there, and hopefully you'll start playing around right after this. So I'm going to jump into another Airtable base, and just to kind of build some automations off of. And again, I'll be sending these afterwards through Kate. I think she'll help with templates. Thank you. With some templates and all this stuff so you can just like copy and start doing this immediately. Okay, so what I wanted to work on for the second one was like a little bit more complex workflow, which is like a CRM. So it's not just the one table where we track all the requests. Now we're tracking all of your contacts. Every contact is associated with an account, right? Every account has, you have interactions, but most importantly, we're tracking opportunities. We all have seen a CRM before. This isn't anything crazy. We're just tracking opportunities through this pipeline here. As you can imagine, there's a bunch of cool views in there that you'll be able to play around with, but we don't need to get waylaid there. So I was thinking, what are some cool things that we might want to do with a CRM? So one problem that I have had in my past life in business development type roles or fundraising is you're creating new pitch decks every time you have a meeting, and you're always thinking to yourself like, wait, did I sub out the logo? Do I have the right name? Do I have the name of the person that I'm talking to in this deck? You spend all this like admin time just doing that stuff. So I thought it would be pretty cool if you could basically create a customized pitch deck, on demand. So in this case, we're looking at active proposals. So these are all opportunities that are in the proposal stage. And this might be a time when you want to create a deck. I'm talking with, let's see, Robin Networks, it looks like. So maybe I want to create a sales deck. So I just click that button. Now, as you can imagine, there's a new view that a record just entered into. So here's the create sales deck view. And where was it? Robin Networks right here, create sales deck. So we didn't even get to see the magic happen, but it did in the background. This link didn't exist before. But let's open it up. Oh, and look at that. There's a Robin Networks branded pitch deck that was just created. It has the date of the proposal, merged in. This is super simple. Let me pull, I'll show you the Zap so you can just see how it's done. In this case, a new record enters a view. You can create a template in Google Slides and then merge in data from your CRM into the slides directly. And then I went back, and so that created the new presentation. And then I went back and pasted the URL for the presentation into that record in Airtable. So not only was it automatically created, I had it right next to me, where I was doing my work. Again, very simple. Like if you look at this is not complicated, but could save you just loads of time, And the real power is not only knowing that you can do it, but having everything kind of built out in a systemized way so that you can start building automations on top of it. The last thing that I wanted to show is we've spent a lot of time in Zapier, and Zapier is really powerful for if this then that, right? It's really powerful for I have a trigger and I want to go do something. I want to go do one thing. Like this one record has entered a view. I want to go do one thing with that information. But obviously, like most software doesn't work that way, right? Most software is doing more complicated things than just if this then that. And how can we do that with no-code tools? And this is where a tool like Parabola is super powerful. Oh, looks like, let's see. An unknown error has occurred. Well, maybe I won't be able to show this to you. Parabola. I'll definitely be able to send an example though. Let's see. Okay, well, hopefully this works. We'll see. What Parabola does is it lets you ingest data from a data store, in this case, Airtable, and then it lets you transform the data. So it lets you actually filter it, group it, create new rows, create new columns, and then go do something with it. So that's really powerful, right? Zapier Zapier basically just lets you do stuff with the data that you already have. Parabola lets you change the data that you have. So that's really cool. So the idea here is I want to send, let's say I'm the head of sales. I want to send a pipeline update to the CEO every Monday morning. So I want the CEO to know, what deals do we think are going to close this week? Now with Zapier, you wouldn't really be able to do that, right? Because what you really need to do is you need to look at let's go back to the CRMs. You can see, we want to look at every opportunity. We want to look at the opportunities that are going to close, filter down to the opportunities that are going to close in the next week. And then we want to create a summary of all of those and send that information to somebody. So that's different than what Zapier is good at. This is where Parabola really shines. So in this case, and just show you, I imported all of the data from that exact Airtable base that we were looking at. So you might recognize some of these names. The Robin networks, for example, is right here. So I imported all of this data. Then there's a few things that I want to do to it to do exactly what I just described. First is I'm using what's called their date comparison. I don't know what you would call it. Date comparison tool to compare the expected close date column to the current time and return in weeks. So you can see what that looks like over here. I created a new column called date comparison, and here's the comparison between the expected close date and the current time in weeks. Now I want to filter it down to just those deals where that number is within a week. So that's what I'm doing right here. And now you can see, all of these date comparisons are less than one. They're less than -1. They're all happening, or greater than -1. They're all happening in the next week. And then I do some formatting here. That doesn't really matter, though I'll explain it in the tutorial follow-up. Then I do like this quick text merging. All I'm doing here is creating a new column that has the opportunity name and the amount, just so it's really easy to read. It's just a formatting thing, nothing more than that. Then I'm merging values. So in this case, if you are familiar with SQL, this would be grouping. This is like a group by. So I'm grouping all of the rows that have a date comparison value of -1 and turning them into an array. And now you can see they're just all of the deals, comma, delimited right now. And then the last step is to send an email. So actually when you, let's see if this works, because there was some error getting thrown before. So when you run it, this is super simple, but you're gonna get an email that just has, and actually I can just show you what the email looks like. That's even better. So basically you just get an email with the subject line, weekly sales pipeline update. And the body is these deals are expected to close this week, and it's just all of the deals that are expected to close from that array. That's it. But what's really powerful about this that we didn't touch on before is not just that you can information, which is like heads and shoulders above what you could do, what you do in Zapier, but also that you can schedule these flows to run. So for example, if you wanted this to send every morning or every Sunday night, you can just create a rule where you say, I want this to happen, on a certain day of the month or once a week or every Monday, whatever it is, you can set a rule for them, for this flow to be, to run at that time. So this is truly like a set it and forget it type of system that you can build for yourself. So That's a parabola example. Hopefully that's kind of like opening up your mind to other types of things that you can be building with these tools. And you're not just limited to if this, then that. There's a whole other host of things that you could build. I wanted to spend the last few minutes here. One is I wanted to, I guess we only have 8 minutes. I know there were some questions too. So one thing is I wanted to brainstorm quickly what your most repetitive tasks are. And there's kind of 2 reasons for this. One is I think it's really useful to hear other people's like repetitive tasks that maybe I should automate this. Because I bet if it's my repetitive task, it's probably yours too. And maybe you could automate it as well. The other reason is we're creating tutorials for all of these. So we just would love more ideas, and then we can create tutorials. We'll send them out to you, and then you'll be able to just like copy what we've done. So I'll just throw it out there. If anything comes to mind, throw that in the chat. Oh, you mean, yeah. 200 to 300 emails a day? That's crazy. And are you getting, that's an example where, you know, it's hard, if they have to come in through email, it's kind of hard to parse them because email is so unstructured. But if you could get them to come in via, you know, a form submission, then all of a sudden you can start acting on them. And it doesn't have to be Airtable, by the way, right? It could be Typeform, it could be, you know, any other tool. Create a calendar. Let's see this, Lena. I run strategic planning, same foot. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so adding new users into a CRM, 100%. That's dead simple with these tools. You could do it with Zapier or Integromat. Either of those work really well. We use Salesforce internally, and we have a whole system of Zaps, you know, integrated with Salesforce to do a whole bunch of things. So absolutely. And for calendar, that's interesting. So you can definitely, so Zapier is integrated with Google Calendar. You can create new calendar invites. You can invite people, you know, all of that based on things that, you know, projects that you're managing. So there might be some way to do it that way. It kind of depends on how exactly the projects are set up, but I'd encourage you to check it out. I think there's probably something there. And then Rashab, I'm curious, what are you interested in integrating with Shopify or Amazon? And while you're answering that one, oh, leads data, okay. Yeah, so you definitely can. You definitely can integrate with both Amazon and Shopify. Or actually, I don't know about Amazon, but definitely with Shopify. Actually, Airtable happens to be very, very commonly used as an inventory management system for Shopify. So that's something that people is a well-trod path, and there's lots of integration examples for that. And then, yeah, you can certainly integrate with all of these workflow management tools. They're all, what's great about Zapier is they have an incredible long tail. So they integrate with 2,000 plus of these tools, and all of the ones you mentioned are there. And Brett, I'm just looking to see what you're pinging about here. Oh yeah, yeah, you can definitely do that, Brett. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. And we should create a tutorial on how to do that. It sounds like you might even know what you need to do to make it happen, but we should create a tutorial to make that work. Cool. And I wanted to also make sure I know there were a few, yeah, definitely Brett and Lena, I'll be following up with this or on this with a bunch of templates for everything that you saw today. So both the slide deck as well as all of the Zaps and all of the Airtable bases. So you'll be able to just kind of put them together yourself. And it should work pretty well. And Gemma, good question. The Shopify tutorials, there's nothing that has been built by Airtable, but if you go to, if you Google it, there's a ton out there. And there's a few that have been open sourced on something called Airtable Universe, which is it's like a place where people can publish templates. So there's a few example Shopify inventory trackers on Airtable Universe that you could check out as well. And cool.
David, it looks like we had one other question come in through the Q&A chat there.
I didn't see it, so I'm spending all this time looking at.
We'll use these last few minutes just to answer.
Oh, Kenner, great. All right, looks like you realized I wasn't looking at the Q&A. Thank you for asking it in the chat too. Sorry. Yes. Oh, Kenner, good. Yeah, great question. So you can, here, I'll show you how to do it right now. With our last minute, let me show you. So you can create what is called a shared view. And it's, you can make it read-only. So I just, this view is a read-only view. I just copy this link, then we open it up in a new tab here. And you can see that it's only the data from that view. And I'm not able to see any of the other records. And you can also actually hide fields, right? So if I wanted to come in here, like I shared this view, right? And let's say I'm like, these people don't need to know all this, like all they need to know is this, right? You can go back, and when I just refresh this, now it's just that subset of data, right? So you can easily create kind of a subset and share that externally. And then Ignacio, I'll try to answer this last question, and then I know we got to run. So there are amazing examples out there. I think that so I would check out MakerPad if you've seen MakerPad before, or if you've heard of MakerPad before. It's makerpad.co. They have a ton of tutorials and good examples of like MVPs, that are really built with these tools. I think my real answer is that the challenge with these tools is going to be scalability. So, Airtable is an amazing database as like a database you can touch and feel, right? But if you have 1 million customers or 1 million leads or 1 million whatever that you need to track, like you should be using a real database. You can't use Airtable anymore. And I think that's true for Zapier as well. Like Zapier is your API call. If you're doing, 100 API calls a day, you're fine. If you're doing 1 million a day, you probably need to start using some code. But I think I think very often people are, they think, well, I'm going to get there someday, so I may as well start by building with code. And what I would say is it's going to take you way longer to get there than you think. So start with these tools, and you'll learn way more. You'll be able to iterate way faster in the meantime. And by the time you need to build with code, it'll be way more obvious what you need to build. Like I would say actually one of the most common things that people use Airtable for is as a CRM. And it's not because Airtable is going to be their CRM in 5 years. It won't. But because they built the CRM with Airtable, they were able to really understand like what they even need of a CRM. And then they can, when they finally do build when they finally do implement Salesforce, let's say, they know exactly what they need in that, and they can save a lot of time and money when they're implementing it. Yeah, so I know there's more questions coming in, but we're at time and I want to be respectful here. So let me stop sharing quickly. Thank you all for your time, and Kate, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, David. Yeah. No, this was awesome, and I know there's lots of questions. If you have a question that you didn't get an answer to, we will be happy to follow up and connect you. If you want to get a great perk that we have with Airtable, all of our Passport members get 2K in free credits, and just go to GSVlabs/passport to go visit that. And thank you again so much, David.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, this was great. Thanks for being so engaged. Really enjoyed myself. Have a good night.
Awesome. Have a good rest of your day, everybody, or night, depending on where
Yeah, that's just me, I guess.
Yeah.
See ya.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.